Yes, and in the case of the Bani Israel, the children of Israel, the Jews, for them it was other things were not permitted, which Allah made permitted later on. Like for example, the fat of the ox or something like that, the fat of the cattle, it was not permitted for them. And Allah says in the Quran, this is because of their disobedience. So certain things they were not permitted because of their disobedience to God Almighty. But besides that, I totally agree.
Their disobedience. Whose disobedience?
The disobedience of the Jews. So they have been basically not permitted to eat certain food because of their disobedience. That means it was made haram for them because of their disobedience. I believe this is in Surah Baqarah. I forgot exactly which ayah it is. But when Allah has prohibited something not to eat, then you don't eat of it. Yes, regardless of how ethically formed you can have it.
How can God prohibit? How has He done so?
How? It's Allah's creation.
No, by what I mean, so has He done so through the Prophet Muhammad's message? Did He send a message through someone? Did He say?
Oh no, this was the message of the previous. Sorry, this was through the message of Moses. So the previous, yes.
Okay.
Because once Prophet Muhammad came, what was prohibited, it became halal. So for example, this fat of these cattle and so on, which was prohibited, now it's halal. So now it's permitted. So it's been less restrictive in terms of the dietary needs. And the only things that became haram in terms of like animals, like not eating the flesh of the swine and so on, and not eating the, not consuming the bones and, the carcass or the blood. So these things are not permitted. However, the other animals are now permitted. So for them, I think even things like, if I remember correctly, camel meat is also not permitted for them, or rabbit is not permitted for them either, and shellfish, yeah.
But see, a lot of these things are not permitted through a reason given by human. A human has decided something is bad, and therefore it's not permitted.
Are you talking about the religious rulings now, or you're talking about some?
I'm talking. For an example, like there's been a long list of things that are prohibited. For an example, and along the lines, at some point, each thing has been prohibited for a certain reason, because of a tribute that animal or that particular has.
Yeah, you're right. There is always some reasoning behind. For example, why is it prohibited to eat? To consume animals which haven't been slaughtered in the religious manner. So for the Jews is a kosher, for Muslims is a zabiha, the halal way. And this is again come down to the ruling of what God permitted in terms of how to slaughter the animal for meat. So you don't just chop off its head and that's it. Yes. And the reasoning for that, they say, is because the blood flows out completely. Doesn't. So for example, if they just chopped off the head, the animal can have a stroke and the blood doesn't pump out completely. It remains inside the body, inside the meat, and which is not permitted to eat. So there is reasoning behind.
If you hang the animal upside down and hang it by its neck hang, it's still drain. The blood will still drain out.
Yeah, but not as much as when, for example, when the heart completely stops. Yes, then it'll still retain some of the blood. It won't pump it all out. But when it's
what I do understand is about giving shock to, like, making an animal die through shock.
Yeah.
And about it, because even I've learned through I like butchery, for example. I've watched lots of butchers and they talk about meat and how when an animal dies and the animal dies in shock, it kind of destroys it. The meat isn't as good.
Yeah.
It's not as good quality. So.
And that is one of the reasons we don't. There are many Muslims who would only follow or eat the meat which is not basically killed by shock. The animal killed by shock. Yes, because again these rulings are there for a reason, and because now we find out why. For example,
now what's this talk about electric shock?
Yes.
Mean by like physical, like body shock, like when something surprises you, and you're shocked and you die in fright.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people can pass out through shock. That's the type of shock I mean. Like when something is.
Oh, you mean die by itself from shock?
Like die by. Yes. The animal's not going to die by itself. Yeah. It's going to have that shock.
Yeah. So if an animal died, through shock or something, and it's not even slaughtered in the halal way, then that becomes a carcass. It's kind of not permitted anyway. So anyway, sorry, what were we discussing with regards to? So your question hasn't been answered about the halal.
My question was just if animals do not have a good life.
Oh yes, that's right. You mentioned that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. One of the
halal?
things that Islam and the Sharia does stress is that the animals should be treated correctly. So you're right in terms of how the animals are treated today. Even transporting them from one place to another is horrendous. The condition that they live in is horrendous. So this is something that we should make an effort to not support these kind of businesses which mistreat the animals. Yes, you're right. We must make an effort to basically minimize the harm done to the animal as much as possible.
Because brother, I know for a fact,
Yeah.
I've seen documentaries of the same chicken factory that gives the normal chickens, gives the same chickens to the halal butchers, and there's a man who slaughters those chickens. It's the same chickens, but it's being slaughtered in different places. Now, one chicken becomes halal, one chicken doesn't. For me, it's the same chicken, and the chicken didn't have a good life. So when I think of it in my just logical rationale,
No, you are absolutely right. Yeah, those butchers who know that this animal has been mistreated, and they still present it to the punters as halal, then the onus is on them. They'll be the ones accountable on the day of judgment. That doesn't mean that the people who are consuming this, they have basically.
what if the people have the knowledge? What if the people are
Yeah,
aware?
if they know it and they're still doing it, they'll be liable for it. But what I'm saying is that these halal certification programs, like for example the HMC, the Halal Monitoring Committee, they give certification to only those establishments where there is no abuse of animals prior to it being slaughtered for meat.
I don't think factory production is considered abuse within
No.
animal rearing.
It depends. Like there are different licenses, different bodies,
No, but I'm
different
saying
committees.
If that particular body won't consider factory production of animals as bad.
Yeah, but
as
when
ill
you
treatment
say
of
factory
animals.
production, there are ethical methods that certain factories follow. Who I would call them factories still.
You know what I mean?
but-
Enough,
but-
like, intense
Yeah, but
factory.
what I'm saying is that there are people who do follow ethical farming, ethical practices in these establishments as well.
Would you
And
not
that
say,
is
so. Would you not? Can I go back to a point about justification earlier?
what.
Would you not say this is not just a justification for making halal like some things that are halal that are quite clearly not
No, but that's-
seem okay?
Yeah, but bro, that's what I'm telling you. That these halal monitoring committees, they actually look at the entire process. So from the time the chicken is born until the time it's slaughtered for meat, they monitor the entire process.
I
And
understand
only then they would give license to this establishment, this business.
But
Otherwise they
but
wouldn't.
They must be giving licenses and to these businesses because, like I'm saying, those same chickens are being licensed, are being stamped, are being sold with a halal sticker.
No, but
So
when
surely
you say
with-
halal, there are like I don't know how many different bodies are there which give this. It's not just one body.
Okay, fine.
So that's why I'm making you aware that there are different bodies who give different businesses license. So some have very stringent criteria, like HMC, which I told you about. They do not even allow the electric shock. Yes, prior to the slaughter, they do not even allow that, regardless of whether it's a chicken or a cow or a goat or whatever it is. Yes, so there are bodies which are very stringent in their requirement, the criteria as to whom they present the certification to, and there are other bodies who do not have such stringent criteria. Now it's up to you to buy meat from which butcher or basically a butcher having a certain certification, and not to buy from him if he doesn't have that particular stringent criteria certification. So there is always, like I say, there is always a way. Whenever you want something to be halal, there's always a way out there to find out. Okay? And yes, I believe it's pretty much similar in the kosher requirements, because they have a very stringent requirement as well. Yes. So yeah, going back to the salvation question, I mean, I don't know if that was answered, but basically you said that in terms of intention. I said ultimately it comes down to what is good and what is bad. And if it is not something which is an objective morality, then you are left with your own desires and your own whims. And I'm saying to you particularly, this is with anyone. There might be an atheist or whoever not following a particular religion because it's not stipulated in their, they don't have such, what is a grounding in terms of stipulating what is prohibited and what is not. Then they will eventually use their own interpretation. That's the word you used earlier, isn't it? And to me, interpretation can be open to everyone because now it's subjective. So what might be good to you might be bad for someone else. What might be bad for them might be good for you. So how do you resolve that?
Okay. Would you say that something that is objective is that everyone has feelings, everyone feels things, and that pretty much every emotion everyone has felt at some point?
No, what I mean by objective is something not you yourself.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm now asking you, would you say that something that could be considered objective is human feelings, and that the fact that all humans have feelings and feel pretty much all feelings that are out there?
No, all the feelings are different, isn't it?
So for
we all have different feelings.
Everyone at some point is going to experience jealousy, for example. We're all going to experience jealousy. We're all good, but in experiencing jealousy,
jealousy is not always bad.
but this is it. In
So if you had a wife and somebody is staring at your wife, or basically whatever it is, yeah, you have the right to be jealous.
Okay, you do have the right to be jealous. But
so in that case, it won't be jealous.
No, you're not necessarily jealous because you know she's your wife. But what is important in this situation is the free will of what to do in the situation. Yes, something has made you feel jealous, but how are you going to act upon it? Because, for an example, people act upon feelings, and that's what then becomes subjective of how they. No,
I think we're getting two things mixed up. So you're talking about emotions, yes? Emotions are different from objective morality.
Okay.
Two different things, because objective morality is, for example, in the code of law, you have defined what is constituted as a crime and what is not a crime.
Okay.
Yes. So we have books of law where things are of a criminal offense or not a criminal offense. So what is defined as in law as being set, yes? So you cannot have if or but about it. For example, if somebody doesn't buy a ticket on the bus and he wants to travel, then that is an offense. So you can be prosecuted for that. Now this is something you cannot change, you see? Because that is something that you have defined already. Okay. So objective morality is something that God has already defined.
That's something humans have defined.
Yeah, I'm giving an example of human.
Okay.
But in terms of religion, what is objective morality is something which God has defined as being prohibited. For example, consuming alcohol in the case in the case of Muslims. In other religions, it's permitted. But we know that Allah says that it is haram to consume alcohol, so we do not consume alcohol.
Has Allah said one thing to Muslims and a different thing to Christians? Because it's the same God?
No.
There's only one God?
No, that's not how it works. So, for example, the previous Sharia, yes, like for example, maybe in the time of Isa alayhi salam and in the time of Moses, yes, they might have something which was permitted, yes, but the following prophet, the one who came after him, has prohibited it. Why? I'll tell you why. Because in the previous Sharia, God had given them maybe the option to drink alcohol. Yes, I'm saying maybe. I'm not sure. But later on, God prohibited it. Now, it is up to God when He decides what is prohibited and when He decides it's permitted. Because ultimately, that's what I meant by objective morality. Because this is something that has been defined clearly in the faith, in the scriptures. So no human being, regardless of how they personally feel about it, or regardless of their intention, can make something which is haram into halal, which is prohibited into permissible.
What I do want to ask is that you mentioned in the time of, for an example, something
say previous prophet, yeah.
And now it is not permitted. Like
yeah.
For an example, in the time, since Muhammad, it has not been prohibited.
Yes. No, it is prohibited. The alcohol is prohibited.
You don't do it.
Yeah.
Would you say that we are still in the time of Muhammad?
Yes. Because Muhammad was the last messenger, and there's no messenger to come after him.
Just because he was the last messenger does not necessarily designate that we are in his time. Because if he is the last, time is going to go on for a long time.
Yes.
And it does not necessarily mean that that moment is the same as that moment, and that we are in this moment, and just everything after that. Do you kind of mean what I'm saying? We are not necessarily in Muhammad's time.
We are. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
As far as Islam is concerned, we believe that every messenger, when they come with a law, yes, it is the law until the next messenger comes.
But there is no nothing. This is my point.
Hear me out, hear me out. I haven't finished. So because Muhammad is the last messenger, yes, so everything that Muhammad brought, yes, has to be law because there's no more messengers to come. And also Allah has stipulated in the Quran that the only religion Allah will accept is Al-Islam. Now what is Al-Islam? Al-Islam means to submit to the will of God. Yes, a Muslim by definition is the one who submits to God, and Islam is submission to the will of God. Now, because there is no more messenger to come, everything that came in the Quran as a revelation is now the law until the end of time. Are you with me?
I am.
So we do not say that because Muhammad came 1400 years ago, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came 1400 years ago, that the law only applies up to maybe 1,000 years, and then what?
Allah or God also said is obey the law of the land.
That's different again.
I understand it's
Yeah,
different.
we have to distinguish between the two.
Of course, we distinguish between the two.
Yeah.
But in the same way, for an example, Britain isn't Muhammad's land, for an example.
It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
But when Muhammad was alive,
Yeah.
things were completely different in Britain as they would have been in the Arab lands where he was from.
Yeah.
You know, so.
You're talking about the culture, is that what you're talking
The
about?
culture, yeah, I guess
Yeah,
it's
but
the culture.
but
And I'm
again, we
saying-
have to differentiate, because you see, something which is a Sharia, the law by Sharia, yes, the religious law or the theological criteria is different from, say, for example, the traffic laws here. Yes, so the traffic laws is the law of the land. You have to follow that, regardless of, because it's not something that impinges on your faith. So if I do not follow the traffic laws, then yes, I'll be breaking the law of the land and also of the Sharia, because the Sharia requires you to follow the law of the land. Yes, as long as it doesn't it doesn't contradict the Sharia. It
I
doesn't.
guess my other point then is, at the same period as Muhammad was alive, people in other lands would have had their own belief in God, in what God is and how God should.
Everything superseded by the Quran, everything else. So regardless of what your faith was previously, regardless of whether you were Bani Israel, you were a Jew, a Christian, or whatever faith you were following before, once the Quran was revealed to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and after his prophethood, yes, if you accept Muhammad as a messenger and a prophet of God, and if you accept that and if you submit to God, then you have to abide by the Sharia. You see, because all the books before and all the laws before, they have now been superseded by the Quran.
But I think this thing of superseded often makes people think that I now disregard the books, because yes, it supersedes, but it adds new things and new messages. It's not superseding to disregard everything that's said before. It's coming and it's giving you a new message. It's giving you new knowledge. It's not saying, yo, disregard everything that's been said
It's not disregarding. Supersede doesn't mean disregard.
100%.
Supersede,
That's what's happened, is
supersede,
my
what it
point is.
means is like